Hello, my friends, and welcome to a new live broadcast. Today, we'll be going back to reading The Resurrectionist, the lost work of Dr. Spencer Black, and we will pick up from where we left off last time. Now, let's go. Let us begin our journey into the madness of Dr. Spencer Black. 1888 1908, the Human Renaissance. My lab is more than a cold table fashioned of wood and metal. It is a heartbeat, a vessel, my home and temple. Spencer Black. In spite of this family tragedy, Black had reaffirmed his conviction in his work. His journal reveals his feelings after parting company with Bernard, Samuel, and his hometown of Philadelphia. We are now traveling to Chicago. Elise is resting quietly. My brother and I are at odds. Our friendship, I fear, is irreconcilable. I had no opportunity to explain myself as well as perhaps he would have required to merit compassion. There was no opportunity, but how could I have? Would I discuss the minutiae of the scientific details pertaining to the complex structures of all that governs life and the obedience required to deviate from it, creating a new specimen? It would require a millennium to explain and write it down. But all the while the creature lived. Is that not enough? I cannot be still. I cannot rest or sleep. I won't escape what I set out to do. My work is more than a curiosity now. I knew nothing when I was young. I was far from death. I couldn't taste it on my teeth as I do now. I didn't give enough thought to what I was doing as a doctor or scientist. I am careful now. I have left whence I came. We have finally arrived. It is now morning. I am delighted at the stillness of the tall grass in the fields and the quiet of the horses, stopped, steaming with heat and unable to go any more. Elise is still asleep. I won't wake her. She has just begun to rest. My beloved and eternally precious Elise. I could write that 1,000 times and not tire. How it pains me that of all the flowers to bloom this spring, she is the one I will not see. April 30, 1888. Upon arriving in Chicago, Black began work on a new show, The Human Renaissance, that would be a showcase for his living evidence. In 1890, after 2 years of development, Black unveiled the show in Boston. Promotional handbills advertised the winged woman or angel child, and Darwin's beagle, a canine with functional wings grafted onto his back. Some speculated that the creatures were accidental mutations, optical illusions, or elaborately costumed animals. Others, correctly, believed they were surgically assembled hybrids, but Dr. Black himself claimed they were newly discovered life forms. From the fall 1891 issue of Chicago Journal of Science, a man, scientist or not, who can manipulate nature through vivisection or any means to this end does not practice science, but instead knows it and possesses a power that no man should wield, for this work no man should have wrought. William J. Jetty, M.D., F.R.Sc., Professor of Surgery in the Anatomy Department of the University of Medical Science, New York. Some of the performers in the Human Renaissance were Dr. Black's patients from Ward C. Others were patients he'd met during his travels with the American Carnival. All their conditions were extreme. One young man was said to have had leg transplants. He bore the limbs of a much taller man with a darker complexion. Another patient was a formerly conjoined twin, a 17-year-old girl named Rose. Her surgical procedure was so elaborate that it involved a new heart, lung, kidney, spleen, and arm. The girl's parents said that Black had even made her prettier than before. Her twin sister had died during the surgery. To the malformed, the sick, or the diseased, Dr. Black had become something of a folk hero. He was ridiculed. National Journal of the Medicine and Science, Vol. 2, Number 8, Philadelphia, PA, September 1891. Estimate 1812. New sideshow at traveling carnival, medical marvel or menace. Dr. Spencer Edward Black hosts what he calls a triumph over the fate of man in his traveling sideshow with the American Carnival titled The Human Renaissance. In this performance he showcases the common thrills that are expected at these events: bizarre skeletons, strange creatures in glass jars, and amputated limbs from a variety of imagined animals, among many other odd items. What is most interesting, or disturbing to one's senses, is the taxidermy collection of mythical animals such as the mermaid, the sphinx, the minotaur, and even the pegasus. It is obvious that these are not real creatures. The doctor will tell you so himself. They are instead a vision of what may come. Dr. Black purports that the alleged creatures were once real and can be made to be real again. Yes, it's true, an outlandish claim indeed. However, his presentation has led to a great deal of trouble for him. Angry mobs gather to protest his work. Police are reported to have arrested the doctor on a number of occasions, and it is said that he is even estranged from his own family, all but his son, who assists him while on the stage. The Human Renaissance show will be performing in Philadelphia, October 13 to 25, and though there are many who are curious, there are many more who are outraged. Why must he come here with that deplorable act? We are a good city with good sensibilities. We have no need for any of that Frankenstein nonsense, says community organizer Garth DeWitt. Among the attractions of the sideshow must be included Dr. Spencer Black's most impressive and disconcerting exhibit, Darwin's Beagle. It is what appears to be an ordinary beagle with working wings. Wings that function so well the animal needs to be changed to the stage so it doesn't fly away from the patrons. If this is indeed an illusion, which it must certainly be, then a splendid one it is. This novelty is a new act for the Doctor, and is anticipated to attract a great number of curious onlookers. Article written by David O'Boyle. Newspaper clipping from the National Journal of Medicine and Science. Despite their claims of being a national publication, the journal was based in Philadelphia and rarely covered events outside the immediate region. Its readership consisted largely of local residents, not medical professionals. Your suspicions are acute, and undoubtedly not without the prerequisite research on the nature of my work. Why, you'd think that we doctors were monsters the way some go on about their God and sanctimony and blasphemes. We are scientists, not demons. The tradition of carnival performers providing food, medicine, and other charities to the needy and sick still carries on in Black's name in many regions of the world. While he toured, his reputation for offering surgical help, sometimes called miracles, was widespread enough to warrant pilgrimages to see him. There are accounts of children suffering from life-threatening diseases, whose families traveled hundreds of miles, and sometimes even further, to seek out his services. On one such occasion, Black wrote in October 1891. She was brought to us, with neither arms nor legs, brought not only to our show, but here on celestial terra itself. When she was found, there were none to claim her. She was alone, save the box and a letter that the poor child was abandoned with. Her family, ashamed of their daughter, failed to see what she really was. They saw only a monster. The condition of her birth and deformity was not a punishment, or an omen, or a hex cast upon her. She has lost blood, precious blood. I will give her back what was supposed to be hers. The patient was a 9-year-old girl, Miriam Helmer. She was born with no arms, only hands, and very short legs, quite possibly a form of the condition known as Robert's syndrome. Dr. Black grafted wings onto the girl's shoulders, and, after a brief healing period, she began performing in his show. Black presented her as the Winged Woman, claiming that her lack of arms was a genetic attempt to sprout wings. The failure could be attributed to the fact that her composition was largely human. Miriam performed in the show for several years before she died from unknown causes in 1899. With Miriam Helmer, Black introduced his theory of self-resurrection, the idea that he could unlock the body's natural memory of its ancestral past by giving it real physical reminders. Armed with these prompts, the body could rebuild on its ancient knowledge and then self-resurrect. He cites numerous references to self-resurrection in a book called The Book of Breath, but it is widely believed this book is one that Black himself was writing. To this day, no manuscript or volume with a similar title or description has ever been found. The Human Renaissance show ran from 1892 to 1893 and attracted controversy with every new performance. Disturbances and fights were common. Religious leaders protested Dr. Black's creations. Political leaders spoke out against him, and nearly the entire medical community decried his legitimacy. Even the American Eugenics Society found fault with Dr. Black, describing his work as regressive. It is an abolition of modern efforts, an attack on the human form. These beasts are not natural, as Dr. Black says. They ought not to be displayed for the public, but rather driven back into extinction. Edward Stoltz, Director of the American Eugenics Society. But as has been evidenced all along, Black was not easily discouraged. He was accustomed to arguing and fighting. He had grown into a different kind of showman, one who was quick-tempered and eager to rouse a crowd into a frenzy. His last public performance was at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Scheduled to perform for 2 months, he lasted just 3 days. At every show he was mocked and ridiculed. The mobs grew larger and larger. On the third day of performances, the crowd rushed the stage, killed some of the animals, and burned many of his artifacts before forcing him out. Black was devastated. July 1893. Bernard, perhaps you have heard. Perhaps the jubilant laughter of my demise was carried freely through the air by Hermes himself. Or perhaps you still do not know. I was in attendance at the Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair. I was ridiculed, mocked, and spit upon. They meant to harm me. These are the people, the public, whom I, as a doctor, ventured to help. These are the wounded and sick that I labored to discover cures and remedies for. That wretched flesh they are. They will learn that I can do much more than heal, dear brother. I swear to you that I can do much more now. Your brother, do not forget. After his failure in Chicago, Dr. Black would never host another public appearance, although he would continue to perform in private for select audiences. These shows were not widely advertised and in most cases were not publicized at all. There is little information about the contents of the guest list or what exactly the performances entailed. Itineraries suggest that the show remained active, visiting 3 or 4 venues every week. We do believe that the show remained in cities for only 1 or 2 days at a time. Sometimes it was presented in private homes or theaters. Often, Dr. Black had no choice but to perform in secluded wilderness settings. It's rumored that he performed in the Hills Capitol building in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, just one night before it was burned to the ground. In various journals and diaries, spectators have described an unholy feeling about the performance and its practitioners. The show traveled in America until the winter of 1895. Spencer, Elif, Alphonse, and possibly 6 or more performers and assistants were leaving New York. But instead of heading south to avoid the coming cold weather, Black decided to travel north to meet with Alexander Goethe. Goethe was a wealthy, eccentric naturalist who paid Black for a private demonstration of the show, to be performed at his opulent palatial estate. Goethe possessed several bizarre cabinets of curiosities, which were common among aristocrats of the late 19th century. The care and effort given to his collection were extraordinary. It was often described as a new wonder of the world. There were so many artifacts that they required their own separate building. Dried skins of Visigoth warriors, Mayan weapons, embalmed priests from Egypt, and a number of questionable artifacts, including the arm of a siren and the torso of a sphinx. Goethe claimed that he fished the arm of the siren from the Indian Ocean, and said that it fought with a ferocity that made him believe that he had hooked a Spartan soldier instead. He claimed that the Sphinx was found dead on the shore of the Nile, and the beasts had torn it into pieces, leaving only the tattered remains that he housed in his museum. Advertisement for the World's Columbian Exposition, also known as the World's Fair, 1893. The bird-faced creature, harpy in the center, was possibly one of Black's earlier taxidermy creations. One spectator claimed, "We saw the beasts move on stage. They crowed and moaned like real living things. Not God's creatures, but instead something else, something terrible." Many dismissed the performance as a type of hoax or optical illusion. Spring, 1896. A chance encounter has allowed me to an introduction to the well-known Alexander Goethe, explorer, collector of all things, and man of the world. He was not as I supposed him to be. No, he was a crass and unpleasant creature, his spine crooked in the side, his bones too long for his legs, and scorn painted on his face. The man spoke from within a cloud of smoke, sweeter than the scent of opium. He told me he smoked the nectar of the lotus, and that only he knew how to extract the essential ingredients needed for the everlasting smoke. After a time, I was invited to see his vast collection, a superior one to any I had ever borne witness to. Though I swore to him that I would not disclose what was housed therein, neither in public nor in privately recorded accounts, I can testify that there are indeed wonders in this world. No records remain of Goethe's extraordinary collection. Most of it was consumed by a 1902 blaze. A few artifacts were recovered, but were certainly nothing remarkable. It is likely there was nothing worth recovering anyway. Alexander Goethe was arrested in 1897 for fraud and theft, and he died in prison in 1912. At the beginning of the 20th century, Dr. Black took the human renaissance overseas, where it performed quite well. There are accounts of performances in the British Isles, Europe, and farther south in what is known now Turkey, Syria, and Israel. Evidence of its presence can be found in nearby museums. The local folklore includes tales of a magician with a magic knife and testimonies from people claiming to have been healed by Dr. Black. Throughout the international tour, Black claimed that he had the power to raise the dead, to make people live longer or even forever. He asserted that he could only change the genders and ages of his patients. He performed his surgeries live on stage, in what surely must have been macabre performances. Two descriptions are given here by anonymous spectators. May 3, 1990. He spoke to the audience for a very long time, discussing things I didn't really understand, but it sounded sensible and I knew what he meant. But I didn't understand. He then escorted one of his guests from behind the back of the curtains. The doctor explained that the man's legs had been amputated after an infection took over. The doctor's assistant then placed the man on a table. Dr. Black began to work immediately. Remarkably, the man didn't seem to feel any pain. I've seen this sort of thing before, so I thought it was going to be just a trick. There was so much blood, though, and I was sitting very close. I knew it was real. He took the legs of a dead man and sewed them on. He told us that this procedure could only be done if the body of the donor was recently deceased. Very recently, he said. That's when I didn't want to watch any longer, but I couldn't leave. The theater was so quiet. How could I have left? After only an hour, the man walked. Everyone applauded, but I couldn't. How could I? I saw demon magic on stage. Everyone saw it. The devil has his own private surgeon, and I saw him. June 12, 1901. I witnessed this creation with my own cognition, reason, scientific training, and, least of all, my eyes. This was neither nature nor mischief. The creatures diseased and embalmed, whereas described on the pay-bill, but more perfect than I had expected in their proportions and in what appeared to be a natural displacement of all organic systems, hair, muscles, etc., etc. I cannot imagine a feasible method to arrive at the same result if I were charged with the task of creating such a thing. If this was the work of a charlatan or fraud, then perhaps one of either immense skill or supernatural assistance. The latter I reject. The former troubles me as though I had witnessed a magic trick so persuasive that it was not a trick at all. I am unable to understand the thing which I saw laid before God and spectator. These performances made Spencer Black incredibly wealthy, even as more and more people described him as one of the greatest con men of his time. Critics wrote, "He is nothing more than a magician or a trickster, and Dr. Black here is here to take your money and your good senses." Yet, curiously, no records exist of any critics who admitted to viewing the show. It is rumored that Dr. Black performed surgery on his son Alphonse, completing a procedure that rendered him ageless. He then christened him with a new name, the Sleepless Man. Black makes reference to this in a passage from his journals. "I can prevent death. I can dip my hand into the pool of the fountain of youth. I can cause one to live, be born from death, or be spared of its ravages. The sleepless man will forever drink from that fountain. After one sees the true work of God laid beside the work of man for the benefit of comparison, then one can learn finally, as a child does, that the latter is merely a trinket, an object that does nothing." I have come to know that a great number of scientists are atheistic by social ideological comparisons, though they may believe in God. Their fundamental belief in nature forbids them from any canonical society. What surprises me greatly is the number of religious surgeons and scientists alike. One can only pretend they do not understand the true meaning of nature for a finite length of time. Their confession is inevitable. It is no man's right to see what I show them, but instead a privilege. This privilege must be bridled by a discretion that only I can discern, that only I am able to judge. The show continued for 8 years until a private performance in Budapest during the fall of 1901 went terribly wrong. During that show, one of his creatures, the Serpent Queen, attacked a member of the audience. Nothing more is known about the performance or the victim. The written accounts by local authorities reveal that only that the patron died while in attendance of the performance called the Human Renaissance, hosted by the American surgeon and performer Dr. Spencer Black. The incident must have had a great impact on Black, because he never performed again. He returned to his house in Philadelphia, where he proceeded to expand his research facility. Since leaving Spencer and taking custody of Samuel in 1887, Bernard Black had remained in New York, where he met and married Emma Worstone, a wealthy widow from a good family. Her first husband, an officer in the southern frontier, had been killed in the Spanish-American War. Bernard and Emma were married in 1899, and together they raised Samuel, a promising student interested in architecture and engineering. He went on to graduate from the prestigious Wayne and Miller School of Architecture. As the Human Renaissance traveled throughout Europe, Bernard received numerous letters from Spencer. Most were short, incomplete, and often frightfully obscure and confusing. Because Spencer was always moving from one town to the next, there was no way for Bernard to deliver a reply. This may explain why Spencer's letters often read like journal entries or inebriated nonsense. Strangely, he never mentions Elif's horrible condition. His letters to Bernard suggest that they are merely suffering from domestic troubles. December 1897. Dearest brother, all things are unrelenting. All of the once gentle and supple nectars of life are now venomous and cruel. I am unable to manage my affairs. My bones have dried and cracked, and my poor Elise doesn't forgive me. I know what she must think of me. My son, Alphonse, is a beast of another sort. He is often angry. He has a deep internal malady. I fear him, his destiny. I have nothing now. I am tired and care little of anything. I am lost, dear brother. I miss the company you had once offered. I regret that I cannot see you, and I do wish, most sincerely, that you are filled with joy, that life cradles you as one of its most beloved. Spencer. June 1898. Dear friend Bernard, I trust this letter finds you well. It has been a long while since my last letter. I have been quite busy, I assure you. I cannot say very much at the moment, for the work undertaken, and what is presently at hand is far too difficult to detail within the pages of a mere note. I can say that I offer great apologies to you. I did not mean to cause you alarm or worry at my less orthodox interests. I have suffered a great number of tragedies. My beloved Elise is well. She manages, I suspect. I will be leaving for a travel excursion that may take a great deal of time to complete. Your brother, S. August 1900. Bernard, I must express my gratitude, in so much that your foreboding of my certain demise can only attest to your love and most heartfelt concern for me. I had time to consider in depth that which you have instructed me years ago regarding what to pay heed whilst I continue my work further. I trust I'll be in your debt, and I thank you. Though I admit I would be grateful if, in matters of peril and premonitions of gloom, that you were not a sophist, but indeed a fool. Dear brother, you preserved your life. You coveted it. It was impossible for you to continue in medicine with sickness and death all around. You needed to pursue a quieter science, I understand. You steadily followed the guidance of the learned. You read what you have been instructed to read. You are like a child at practice on a piano. You balance the stick on the backs of your hands just along the knuckles while you play, ensuring proper posture. Then you play something bland and unimaginative. However, the stick will never fall to the floor. Bravo! When I perform, the stick falls. Then a symphony flows from me. Black. October 1901. Bernard. I am no longer performing or traveling. I now indulge in the luxury and leisure of my home. I am no longer in the service of man. You must know these creations can mean nothing to you, nor any other educated man as they meant nothing to me, until they were there, on a table before me, their fatal wounds visible, the hollow in their gaze that no taxidermist could create. No artist or magician is able to conjure the sincerity that only life can bring to the eyes. Bernard, I tell you, I now have them. They live. I understand if you have concerns for my welfare. In time, after my research is complete, I will unveil my discovery. I am as confident as the sun is bright that you won't be disappointed. All is progressing well, with little disruption. I pray heaven not change that. I cannot afford a disturbance. My time now is vital, and how long I need I could never know. I trust that you have, by this point, received the gift I sent to Samuel, and I hope that all is in good order with you and my most gifted child. His well-being is certainly my greatest wish, and a promising future, I'm certain, is assured whilst he remains in your steady care. Please forgive my flattery, as I am writing on a rare occasion of delight and rejoicing, and all seems wonderful. The only dread, I suppose, is that I am restrained to the primitive exercise of poets and dreamers, scratching on paper, splashing ink, fumbling to communicate my joy, my bliss and exultation. Finally, Bernard, I have finally come close enough to see that it can be achieved. If I could, I wouldn't write any other stroke. I would grab hold of you and show you. Against your will and in defiance of your doubts, I would throw you to the floor of my laboratory so that you would gaze up as I did and be prostrate before it as I was, and you would marvel as I do now. Now, surely you understand the meaning of my queer gift. S. Black. In 1908, Spencer Black entered negotiations with a New York publishing house, Thotsky and Son, for publication of his masterwork, the Codex Extinct Animalia. Only 6 copies were completed before Dr. Black withdrew the project and abruptly disappeared. The reasons for his sudden departure remained unknown. Dr. Black had garnered many enemies during his career in the sciences, not the least of whom were the administration and colleagues of his former employer, the Academy of Medicine. Dr. Joab Hollis, for example, never stopped attacking Black's credibility and legitimacy. His articles were published in many well-known papers: London's Royal Society of Surgeons Review in 1891, the New York Medical Journal in 1894, 1896, 1897, and again 1908, with specific mention of Black's book. Dr. Spencer Quack is going to love the fairy tale that can barely serve as adequate to kindle for the fire. I have not read it, nor do I wish to. I am certain that the ink used to describe the creatures from his own madness is a waste of resources. His book will be nothing more than an extravagant and expensive joke the fool will play on himself. Joab A. Hollis, M.D., NYCM, The New York Medical Journal, 1908. After 1908, Alphonse continued alone in the strange practices of his father. In 1917 he was caught butchering small animals in a barn 25 miles north of Philadelphia. He was arrested and committed to a mental asylum. He remained there for 11 years, receiving only one visitor in 1920, his younger brother, Samuel. In 1929, The building burned down from a fire caused by lightning. During the storm, many of the patients escaped. Alphonse was among them. From 1933 to 1947, Alphonse allegedly kept a private zoo, where he housed many of his own creations. He inherited his father's fortune and also gained his own tremendous wealth by claiming to be able to restore youth and beauty for an astounding price. Nevertheless, little is known of Alphonse or his work. Like his father, he was extremely secretive. As for Spencer Black, nothing is known of his whereabouts after 1908. There were no more public appearances, there were no more surgeries. He simply vanished. In 1925, his home in Philadelphia was turned into a small museum, where dozens offered tours and lectures explaining his life and work. The museum closed in 1930. The property changed owners several times until 1958, when the last owner suddenly moved out, complaining of strange noises. The building is presently condemned. The final clue to Dr. Spencer Black's fate is a letter addressed to his brother Bernard, sent 7 years after the last correspondence. It is the last known document written by Black. He had just returned from a 6 month excavation and research trip from the northernmost point of Greenland. The letter indicates that he had been actively pursuing some bizarre treatment for his wife, Elise. Prior to receiving the letter, Bernard had no knowledge that Elise had been burned in a fire, or that Spencer had performed any kind of surgery on her. Bernard shared the letter with the police before embarking on a trip to find his brother. February 1908. Bernard, I have no choice but to conclude the fallacy of my previous studies, however painful it is to accept. I am writing to you tonight to give the deepest thanks and offer the most sincere apology a man such as I can manage. Deluded by my own aims, I could not heed your most eloquent and obvious warning. I could not listen well enough to hear that the future of my work had been foretold by the mistakes of my predecessors, men I hadn't the courage to name as mentors, especially you. I now languish in the solitude of this letter, lamenting. Your laughter at my expense or your scorn would be a salve upon my mind. Nothing can help me, I know. It was I who was the cause of my peril. I cannot be certain if you will ever receive this letter, nor is there much I would expect to arise from it if you could read it now. I can be certain, however, that if any news of me arrives to you, it will be this letter and this letter alone. I have hidden my notes for you to retrieve. Please, brother, help me keep this from the sleepless man, my son, Alphonse. I fear you know of what I am to write, but I fervently hope that you do not. I pray that my work, my labor of the past 10 years, has exceeded any science or philosophy that the learned shall ever endeavor, or be called upon, to examine. If that is so, then perhaps it will end here with me. This box that I have opened. I have succeeded. I have done what none other before me has. I write only to you. I know that by now I am wretched in your esteem and that you haven't even a decent man's regard for me. I had once hoped that, perhaps, before we were in the grave, we could once again be friends. I know that cannot be. My beloved and eternally precious Elise, how beautiful she was. I did love Elise dearly, but that is not why I ventured to perform this wicked work. I have butchered many men. All are innocent when they are on my table. All are exquisite. My purpose has exceeded my function, I am afraid. I have spent my life, the vainglory of my youth, consumed and drunken with the most sadistic of all exploits, study. How can one dare travel into the unknown? Something quite terrible is waiting there, a destruction that would not be mine had I not sought after it. There was a time in the world when nature wore a different mask. Since I set out to discover her secrets, my trials have only increased. What struggles, attempting to see that original face, nature's original design. Now destiny had fulfilled her carefully plotted plan, my eventual and total ruin. Now she laughs, and I will hear that mother of nature every night until my time arrives. I will hear her calling, that wretch, that filth-soaked thing whose foulness is exceeded only by her demon song. Death, so terrible an object, you look away from it, fearing that it may see you and call your name. I have seen many die, scream, and many more writhe in anguish at the hands of disease, injury, or healing. I am ashamed to confess that when a patient screamed, I was relieved some. I know their agony was less than what it could have been. But know this: if they knew what horrible things were available to them, they would take comfort in their own suffering. We are living creatures, and within us is more than we know. The seed of life and death together is sown into our bodies at birth. It can live and die without us. I have seen it and nurtured it and fought and defended it. I have sacrificed and bled, and now I, too, will perish for it, because of it. I know not how to destroy it. I can hear her, that sound. I can hear the screaming, soaring in the darkness, searching for me. I can hear hell calling my name. Elise, my dear wife! She was a descendant of a powerful species, the furry. Elise is now no longer the same woman, nor is she the one in the cracked body of burnt flesh. She has emerged. She has awoken, like the cicada. I learned many things. I wield a mighty sword now. I have taken her as a worm, an opium-addicted wretch, writhing in a scorched body. Listen to me, Bernard. I write only truth. She now pounds the air with her wings and bellows hell's song in hunger. I baptized her with my knife. I saved her. Again, I saved her. The last tone I unturned in my quest was the tombstone. Come quickly. Spencer Black. Bernard never returned to his wife, Emma, in New York. In 1908, 50 years after the publication of Gray's Anatomy, Dr. Spencer Black arranged for the publication of Codex Extinct Animalia. Just 6 copies were printed before Dr. Black withdrew the project and disappeared. The book was never distributed, and the Philadelphia Museum of Medical Antiquities has the only known existing copy. Why Dr. Black stopped printing so abruptly and then vanished remains unknown. The book is an anatomical reference manual, a common endeavor among naturalists at the time. It highlights the anatomies of 11 different species that are, as indicated by the title page, proposed to be extinct. At the beginning of each chapter, Dr. Black discusses key points of interest regarding their respective specials throughout this, sometimes mentions finding specimen, or the partial remains of a specimen, in his travels. It is generally believed that Dr. Black fabricated all these creatures by hand. The whereabouts of the specimens remains unknown. Most were likely destroyed, but it is possible that some are in the collection of as yet unknown individuals. At times, Dr. Black's writing is scattered and difficult to understand. There is a certain hysterical tone to his descriptions that was characteristic of Black in his later years. The Codex Extinct Animalia, a study of the lesser-known species of the animal kingdom, designed as a reference for all practitioners in science, medicine, and philosophy, by Spencer Edward Black, M.D., with comprehensive illustrations and explanatory text regarding the musculature and skeletal systems, additional viscera of select animals. New York, Susky and Son. So I will be reading some excerpts from this book for you guys. I will actually read the descriptions of the specimens that are described here because, as you might have guessed, these are actually illustrations of the mythical creatures done by Dr. Spencer Black himself. Yeah, one artist. I think you guys, you know what? I think if like Black exists in this time, in our time, I think he'll be ahead with the furry community. He'll be like the father of all furries because what? This bitch is so fucking obsessed with doing animal parts onto human that he's literally like that. Yeah, I think he'll be really invested in like fucking furry porn. Back to the okay. Sphinx Alatus, Kingdom, Animalia, Phylum, Vertebrata, Class, Echidnae, Order, Presidium, Family, Felidae, Genus, Sphinx, Species, Sphinx Alatus. Many details regarding the heraldry of the Sphinx are still unknown. The creature has varied widely throughout the African continent. In Egypt, there are great statues of this animal. The Sphinx Sol, the protector and scourge of Ra, the sun god. Sphinxes are shown bearing a ram's head, a criosphinx, or a goat's head. These species are typically depicted without wings. I suspect that, like many flightless birds, the Sphinx lost its need for flight because of geographical isolation. This evolution likely occurred before the animal's arrival in Egypt or Africa. However, I cannot determine whence it originated. The famed Sphinx of Thebes appears strikingly similar to the specimen in my record. Though few in number, the species had a developed human mind with an advanced intellect. They were more than likely fierce and successful predators. Many details regarding the heraldry of the Sphinx are unknown. The creatures varied widely throughout the African continent. In Egypt, there are great statues of this ocean. I just read what I already read. But yeah, there are lots of illustrations of the Sphinx. He included the skeletal illustrations of this creature. I will be reading the mermaid to you guys now. Siren Oceanus, yeah, the siren. The siren, nereid, and mermaid are oft confused. The folklore of these creatures predates the conventions of the scientific method. Nonetheless, the legends denote an accurate account of some of the revolutionary aspects regarding their species. I will begin with the homogeneous nature of them as a species, differing only as dogs many differ in breed, albeit significant differences indeed. The siren was described as a bird in ancient times. Only later did it become a woman of the water. There was, at some point in the past, a need to make specific distinctions between the water human and the bird human animals. Whether it was an error in classification or that the siren evolved into an aquatic mammal is still not well understood. Nereids or naiads share many of the traits of the deeper ocean-born species. They are far more human than the mermaid, and, in many cases, they are nearly entirely human, save the distinct physiological aquatic attributes. This would explain geographic preference for shallow, fresh water. The mermaid, the female of the species Siren oceanus, was less common and certainly more elusive than the siren. It breathed underwater without any need to surface. I speculate the possibility of several variants of the species that exhibit more mammalian traits and therefore required the occasional breathe, as do the dolphin and whale. The task of discovering any such animals intact by means of good fortune alone are nearly impossible. This animal would need to have a fully evolved and substantially unique respiratory system, similar to the gills of a fish but conforming to the structure of a human rib cage. If my theory is correct, and there was once indeed an air-breathing mermaid, this would suggest the existence of a vast variety of species still occupying many shapes, sizes, and functions in the depths of our waters. The pelvis and femur would be robust and generous in length. Considering the large size of the lumbar vertebrae and the thickness of the caudal and anal spines, this particular species of mermaid would have exhibited a greater agility and speed than nearly any other sea animals hitherto documented. The superficial tendons weave over muscular tissues, allowing for greater tension, strength, and resistance. The presence of massive muscular tissue supporting all the fin spine regions would grant this animal superiority, a champion in the water. I think many people have seen his illustrations of the siren's skeleton. Yeah, I've seen this on like Dark Academia pages. He has a lot of drawings of the sirens, and like they're actually really impressive. Though his method of producing this, yeah, I do not even want to think how the fuck he did this. Notes. Dr. Black's notes reference different kinds of satyrs and mention one that he claims to have found in Finland. However, there are no known remains of any specimen that Black may have studied. He refers to the satyr in a journal entry dated September 1906. There are physiological aspects of this being that I, with my limited knowledge, could never quantify, only speculate, suspected how the heavenly song in his throat, a dancer swayed in his gait, and a child's mischief. Satirus hircinus, showing many similarities to a minotaur, as a common goat does to a bull. The satyr shows most important distinctions from the minotaur are its head and superior intelligence. I am well acquainted with the many interpretations